And we're rolling. Welcome to LogRocket. I'm Brian. That's Mike. Welcome.
Thank you, Brian. Glad to be here.
I'm glad to have you here. We should probably intro you properly. Please tell us about yourself.
Absolutely. So I'm Mike. I am also a co-host of a web development podcast called HTML All the Things. And I've been a web developer for, I think, it's approaching 8 years, but I think it's like 7.5. I run my own web agency with my business partner and also podcast co-host Matt. We do small business websites. We also do larger contracts with some California-based companies for doing just actual development, web app development, mobile development, and stuff like that. So we're in a lot of different areas with our development career. And after about, 5 years of it, we decided to kind of shift into podcasting as well. So I have the experience of both just being a regular web developer and a little bit of the content creation side as well.
I noticed, I don't know if we did this on purpose. I don't know if you've thought about this on purpose. I'm trying to have a nice way to say it, like the kind of incestuous idea of like podcast hosts meeting with other podcast hosts within web development. I said it was a nice way, and then I described it as, you know what I'm saying though? But people seem to like it. Do you feel like that happened naturally? Have you noticed it? I guess is a good question.
So yeah, for sure, I've noticed it. I've talked to Alex Booker from the Scrimba podcast. I've talked to you guys now, and there's some other ones I've talked to. I think the Drunken UX podcast is another one that I've talked to. So we kind of are all forming a little bit of a web development podcast circle, which I'm kind of really enjoying, because not only are we all developers or in the web development space in some way or shape or form, but now we have this other niche that we can talk about, and it's really not that often that becomes a thing.
Yeah,
when you can have people to kind of bro down with and or just really have that back and forth about something that you actually know. Because if I talk to my family about this, they have no idea what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I didn't just ask like for no reason. I noticed because like there's like I'm seeing it more and more, and I'm seeing that like there's Discords for each podcast, and then I'm starting to see a little bit more, I think anyway, of like a community within web dev podcast hosts or hosting or something like that. And even if it's not, I don't really know exactly. Something is emergent, and I just wanted to see what you think, if at all.
I think it's getting there, honestly. Like, I don't think there's that many of us to be like a full-on community. But I think it's starting to get there. And for me, I've had a lot of people reach out to me on Twitter and through our Discord asking, how do I start my own podcast, and advice for that, which is a really good sign of what you're saying, that there could be a community starting to form around the space. And I'm all for it. Like, I don't care if there's more of us out there. I think that's only a positive. Competition is great. There's plenty of spaces to fill. This field is expanding at exponential rates. I don't know if you've noticed that as well, especially over COVID. So there's only more content needed, and more people talking about that content, rather than, worrying about competition in the space as well. So it's really an interesting thought that you're saying that there's a community forming around it. I haven't really thought of that before, but I think you're right in the sense that it's starting to form. We're in the early stages of it. So maybe we can kind of push it forward a little bit.
Okay. So you started your podcast like a long time ago, right? You said 5 years?
It's been over 3 years, like 3 years and like 4 months or something.
Okay. So 3 years plus, why? Like, what was it that, like back then, what was it that you were trying to accomplish? How did you sort of think about what it is you were like, why sit down and do it?
Yeah. So again, like I was saying, Matt and I, my co-host and my business partner, we had a small web agency business, and it was going pretty well at that time. We had a really good stable contract. Plus we had a lot of other kind of maintenance programs on the side, maintenance contracts on the side. So we had consistency for the first time in our career, essentially, where we could be like, okay, what's next? Right. So we had a meeting, we sat down, and Matt had already been a co-host on a different podcast about gaming for around 7 years at the time. So he had a really good experience in co-hosting. He had good experience in the whole audio engineering side of things as well. He was helping out with that. So he had that base, and we were like, well, where do we fit? Do we make a YouTube channel? Do we go straight blogging? We wanted to do something that differentiated ourselves from the competition to get better clients, to communicate with the community. That was another really, really big part for us, because Matt and I, although we work together, we don't do the same things all the time. So we never had that opportunity to shop talk a lot. So forming a community around the basis of like trying to find people with similar mindsets was really important. We're always remote, and we intend to be remote forever. So I find it really satisfying to be able to talk shop to people that are doing the same thing, just like we're doing right now. So that's kind of where the idea came out. So it was a cross section of, we were in a good point to do something new. We had a experience with the podcasting side, and there wasn't a lot of competition in the space at the time, even now I don't think there's that much competition in the space. And we had a desire to form a community.
I think it's kind of, I'm interested because I've noticed just in this conversation, you've mentioned competition a few times, or at least a couple times. And I don't really hear that often, even though like it's pretty natural when I ask these questions, like for example, when someone comes on and they're an instructor, which you are, I ask that almost that exact question. I say, hey, do you feel like there's room for everybody? Do you feel like is there at some point where there's just enough instructors for everyone? And the response that I got back and really liked was like, there probably is. Like each instructor or each teacher like is going to have their own kind of spin on things or take on things. You should find the one that's best for you. But I personally think that, yeah, I mean, it's natural to think about the competition when it's kind of your business, it's your livelihood. Do you ever think about that? Obviously you do. Like, how do you think about it?
So absolutely. I think about competition all the time in every regard of what I do, and it's not like a negative thought of competition. It's more of a positive spin on it that, hey, what can I learn from people that have already done it, that have already trailblazed, and where do I fit? Just like you said, like, is there enough instructors out there? Will there ever be a point where there's going to be too many or something like that? Would the competition get too tight? I mean, you're right. Of course, there's going to be a point that it's going to happen. But it's probably not now. And it might not be in the next couple of years, like, you know what I mean? So that's where my thought goes. With any product that you build, I feel like that's the the mindset that you take is there already too much out there? And of course, when we were making the podcast, we did all the research we could to figure out that, okay, there's probably not enough. Like there's not a lot of podcasts that are focused on web development, specifically for junior developers that are just starting out. So we decided to fill that hole, and I think there's space enough for plenty others to come in and fill that hole. But 5 years, 10 years down the line, maybe it will be overcrowded. Like it would be ignorant to think that it's always going to be open, obviously.
Okay. So for your podcast, how do you measure success? Like, how do you know if it's working?
Great question, actually. So when we first started the podcast, one thing that we kind of wanted to do was, again, connect with the community. And almost luckily for us, almost 2 weeks after we created it and put out our first couple episodes, we had people reach out to us talking about the podcast, whether it be through Discord, whether it be through Twitter. We just had that connection immediately with, it wasn't a lot of people. It was maybe like 3 to 5 people at the time. But that was a huge thing for us. Like we were putting it out into the ether. We didn't know what was going on. We were just doing it for fun, really, at the time. We didn't know what was going to happen. But having those first few people give you feedback was a big indicator of success for us. And as we kind of built on that, we created a Discord community for the podcast, for web development in general. And our gauge of success is how much people interact with us. So the Twitter is a perfect example of when I kind of went on Twitter and started taking Twitter seriously in the tech community side. It was a huge eye opener because there's so many people on there. And all of a sudden, people were seeing HTML, the things on Twitter, and interacting with me because of it, because they had already listened to the podcast before. And again, that was another like, okay, great. And obviously to build on that, there is statistics that you can look at. The statistics go up. That's a great indicator. But in a small niche podcast sense, we're not huge podcasters. We're not huge personalities in the space. You know, we didn't have a ton of experience beforehand. So we didn't have that audience to build on. We couldn't expect to be, you know, on the level of, let's say, just syntax as a comparison, obviously. And we didn't want to be either. That's not our competition. So our thought was, hey, if we can connect with some people in the community, if we can establish those great connections early on, then there's something to this. And we did it way faster than I thought we would. We made some really good friends, some really good like people that we trust with work at this point. Like we've found people to work with through the podcast. We found clients through the podcast. So that's our measure of success. That's a really key indicator for us. As long as it keeps growing in the sense of a community again, or as long as I can still have those conversations with people that listen and have questions and have criticisms, that's all we really need.
Yeah, no, I always feel like the hardest part. And one of the things that we were trying to, you know, I think this is episode 70 something for us. So we're still like really pretty new, and it's been maybe a year, was the distribution part. Was like because you had mentioned like, oh, we're just kind of putting it out into the ether, and that it really does feel like that. And all of the other ways that you might think about marketing a podcast, and I don't want to lose the audience and talk about marketing a podcast, but it's a terrible idea. Like all the other options available to you are not great, and they're not for this audience in particular. Nobody wants that. But I do like the Discord part, like, cause that is for me seems relatively new. And to that's kind of what I mean by like, okay, well, this is where the audience goes to talk about the show. And then that's where you have an opportunity to kind of interact that way. I really do like that part. Do you ever get, I'm sure you do, like show ideas or, you know, things you pull out of the disc? Yeah.
Tons, honestly. Like they do such a good job at bringing us ideas that we have a thread obviously there that people can drop their ideas in, and we kind of transfer the ones that we think resonate with us and that we can do to a Trello. So constantly, just in general, the inspirations from our audience or from even the Twitter space and all of that is what drives us to continue, and it gives us all the ideas that we can possibly think of. Like people asked me this recently, where like, aren't you going to run out of stuff to talk about? And I'm like, have you looked at the web development space? Like every day there's a new framework that comes out. Every day there's a new piece of technology. Maybe again, when it matures 50 years down the line, it might become boring, which is great. That's fine. But right now it's the Wild West. Like we could talk about this for every day of the week if we had time.
Yeah, I was just talking to somebody about this. I forget. Apologies. I'm sure it was on this podcast where like there's the idea of kind of like, okay, it's the web dev space is very complex right now, and then it'll eventually kind of shrink. If you're watching the video, you can watch my really helpful hand gestures, like shrink down to a smaller, sort of pipe of like, now it's just kind of a singularity, and then it'll eventually wind up again and be more complicated. I have no idea if that's true or not, but I kind of like the undulating nature of front end development. But I do think that, speaking of new things, that's a decent segue into Svelte. So you have a course on Svelte, and that seems to me like that's something, an area of interest for you, and kind of showing people who are new to either Svelte or web dev about it. Why? What is it they think so cool?
So this is a good one. I was a huge Vue guy for a long time. I still am. I still love Vue, and I like React too. Like I'm not one of those people that care too much about, you know, what framework people use. But the reason I kind of pivoted to Svelte was because I had this experience. I was working on a project with kind of a senior dev at the time, one of my mentors actually, and they always started with like JavaScript jQuery, and that was their like domain. They were really, really good at it. And maybe a year or so ago, I tried to pivot them a little bit into Vue because like I wanted them to see the new technologies out there and how much easier it is to do certain things that jQuery just doesn't do as well as efficiently. And I had trouble. Like I had trouble kind of explaining the concepts, why you would use this instead of jQuery or JavaScript in general. Like I had some trouble. And then a few months ago right now, we were building a project together, and I was like, hey, let's try Svelte. And he's like, well, I don't know. You know, I didn't have a good experience with Vue. And I'm like, well, just try it. Just give it a shot. And literally a day later, he came back to me and he's like, look what I've built. And he had built the whole front end, everything with Svelte, with no jQuery, nothing. And I was like, okay, like this is different, obviously. And he's like, yeah, this made total sense to me coming from JavaScript and jQuery right into Svelte. And I had that connection in my mind that like, yeah, like Svelte has this great almost sugar-free syntax. So like the syntax doesn't have a lot of boilerplate code, and it does look very similar to just plain JavaScript. So someone coming from a strong JavaScript background can pick up a framework really, really quickly. Not to say that like React and Vue are very complicated or bad, but just coming from that mindset of someone just like finishing their, HTML, CSS, JavaScript 3 pillars, I think that to get into a framework and to understand the basic framework concepts like reactivity, like conditional rendering, template looping, those kinds of things, like the technical aspects that a framework really helps you with, that's where Svelte does a really, really good job in. So that's why I wanted to make the course. I wanted to make a course that was almost like intermediary between like your JavaScript knowledge and your framework knowledge, so that when you go and learn a framework, because reality is Svelte is not super popular in this industry yet. I have a feeling it might be, but who knows? React is still the king. It probably will be the king for a long time, and that's fine. But if you're having trouble picking up React, I tell people just take a look at Svelte. Take a look at the course that we created, or go through their documentation, whatever works for you, and see if you can start understanding the concepts there, and then go to React. Because those concepts that you understand in Svelte, they're the same in React, just different syntax, obviously.
That's the hardest kind of content to make, is that intermediate, like there's, right, like that intro stuff, or the intro stuff you can either, pull from the docs or whatever, or, and then the expert level stuff. I mean, yes, it's very hard to make expert level stuff, but also 5 people are able to understand it. Like in the first, like once you get that level, how do you think about like identifying, like what's your process even for identifying this content is probably kind of middle ground? I've done the same thing. That's why I'm asking. Like, how do you figure out that someone who's got like enough, like you said, you've got maybe I should let you answer the question. How about that?
No, I think you were getting there too, because like you said, it's really difficult, but we always tell people to learn the 3 pillars, and it really is difficult to know when to jump from like straight HTML, JavaScript, and CSS to something like a framework. And I always kind of I have this arbitrary line in the sand where I'm like, if you understand function calls, if statements, looping, and arrays, maybe Ajax as well, like maybe some API stuff, right? If you understand those 5 basic concepts, that's usually a good indicator that, yeah, you're not an expert, but you don't need to be. And that's when you can start looking at different things. So that's a line in the sand, and that's not scientific in any way. But when someone asks me, and I've been asked this way too many times at this point that I had to come up with an answer that made sense to me, that's where I kind of go to initially. But having said that, probably almost everyone that I talk to hasn't gone through that process. Everyone is different. Everyone's path to web development is different. And most people are like, well, I started with React and then I went to JavaScript. And I'm not saying that that's the wrong way to do it. It's just like, if I was recommending someone to do it today, there is like a maybe a better path. But if you go through React and learn JavaScript that way, you can still be an amazing developer. There's no problems there at all. It's just, I think that could be harder for people, in fact. So you did something that was more challenging.
You could say that it's the wrong way to do it. I mean, your Twitter engagement would go up a little bit, and maybe you'd get some more listeners, and it'd be all right. I'm sure Twitter's very understanding. Twitter's very cool with differences.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, they are. They're great.
It's actually not that bad, as far as I think, anyway. As far as like, it could certainly be worse. Yeah. All right. So I asked you a question that you've been asked quite a bit, but I think like but where I was looking for was like for Svelte content specifically. Mm-hmm. Like, how do you think about intermediate Svelte content, or do you even think about it that way? Is it?
Yeah, it's a tough one, because so Svelte content is the same as, for me, it's the same as any framework content or whatever. So intermediate Svelte content would be, I guess, a couple steps up. So completing a project, just a simple project, to me would be an intermediate level. So the documentation is the beginner level, just doing those little code snippets that, hide and show a div, that's intermediate. But as soon as you add like a twist to it, people start to kind of freak out a little bit. So as soon as you're like, well, create this application on your own, right? Like create a simple application that can add a workout schedule or something like that, right? It's not a very complex application, But as soon as you have someone think through the steps to create it in a certain framework, that becomes intermediate level for me. And if they can do that from start to finish, right? Now, it doesn't have to be a perfect application in the end, doesn't have to connect to a backend. It could just be front end, depending on what kind of developer you are. But as soon as you can kind of problem solve your way to the end, that shows that you're not just learning the basic concepts, you're also learning how to put them together. And I think that's the answer to your question now that I've come to it myself. The putting together of the basic concepts is the intermediate level.
Do you ever think about professionals, when you're putting together content who might stumble onto your content organically? Like if this is something that, or does that yeah.
Like negatively in the sense that professional will see it and be like, oh, this is the wrong way to do it? Or is it
different? No. Do you ever think when you're making a course or anything, or even just kind of, because I think about it sometimes for us, when it was like, our audience is mostly, working devs who are working on a very specific thing. They forgot how to do a thing or never knew how to do a thing, or something has come out and it just, whatever. They do what most people do, which is Google the thing and then they find us. So I wonder for you, do you ever think like somebody who's, at work or working on something, will they stumble on my content, and will it is there a way that you can maybe speak to both audiences? Does that ever enter your head, or is that a crazy thought?
No, that's actually a really good thought, because recently I was on a project. In fact, I'm still on it. I'm kind of managing a small team, and we've chosen Svelte as the framework. And someone was coming up from React, and they're like, "Hey, I've never done Svelte before. Like, is it hard?" And I just gave him my course, and I'm like, "Listen, just take a look at the course. It's short. It's sweet. Like you can skip through it, but I make some parallels in there specifically for people that have coming from React. So you can kind of take a look and see if it's going to be a problem for you, and then we can kind of have the discussion later." And they went through the course in like an hour, came back to me like, "Yeah, I understand it. I get it. And that's it." So you can absolutely use what I've created or what you create in both settings, both people that are coming from zero or like not in a professional, and people that are working in a team. Because I think this is a different, this like disconnect that people have between people that are like learning and never having done a professional project and people that have done a professional project. The gap is very, very narrow. In fact, probably non-existent, right? Yes, like someone that's already been in a team environment, that's already kind of completed a project start to finish with a team, is going to have a little bit of an edge on someone that's never done that before. But realistically, like, it could be the opposite. There could be someone that's learning on their own that's never done it, even better than someone like me, even, or something like that. Like it depends on where you're at in your journey. Just because someone's a professional doesn't mean they're all of a sudden this expert in any sort of domain. They're just completing problems. They're trying to solve problems and getting paid for it.
Yeah. I mean, and it's that's kind of, I agree is the shortest way to possibly say it. But like the other way is, that's how I like to learn. Like you're just kind of, if you know how to do, whatever, name it, if you know 2 or 3 other things, and then you don't know necessarily how to do the fourth related, but still different thing, like you're going to go and start on YouTube probably. Yep. And, watch, like if my washing machine breaks, I'm going to watch washing machine videos, and, after 5 of them, I'll be the Maytag repairman. Like that's the hope. Usually though, it doesn't really work out that way, but like but I want that person giving me the instruction to talk to me like I have no idea what I'm doing, or at the very least assume like, what a wrench is. Yes. Great. Like start there. Maybe you'll need one. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay. So let's talk a little bit more about your agency. Tell me about what it is, and really what I find super interesting whenever we have folks on like you is like, how did you start building your business exactly? And then really like, how did you get clients? Walk me through the parts that pertain to kind of the web dev portion of it, like maybe not necessarily Chamber of Commerce 101, but I think you can, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I gotcha. So yeah, we started our agency, and we did it right after school for us. So we were both in the same kind of course, computer engineering course. We did it because we had a contract lined up that was going to be kind of an split IT and web development work, which quickly became only web development work because we're not doing IT anymore. scratch that. Don't want to do that. And with that, so we built up one kind of really decent customer that was paying our bills, let's say. And after that, we kind of just went out into our own network. That was our biggest thing. And that's the biggest thing I tell people to do right now is you have to build your network. You have to go out and, talk to your parents, talk to their parents' friends, talk to your friends' parents and stuff like that. If you're starting out young, you have to tap it in, because if you want to do it without that, it's a grind. And I mean a real grind. Like if you want to go on Guru or Freelancer, whatever, Upwork, all those websites, and just try to build your freelancing business from there, expect a lot of underpaid work, trying to underbid people that are essentially being paid nothing initially, because all you have to do in those cases is try to get reviews and try to have that snowball start going. And that part is very, very grindy. I know a lot of people kind of come on and say like, hey, freelancing is great. It's awesome. It's easy sometimes and stuff like that. It's not easy in any way, shape, or form. It's so freaking difficult, especially starting out, because you don't have a reputation. And everything is that reputation. Sure, once you have that reputation, it becomes better and you have more options and stuff like that. It's still not easy. Still feast or famine. But it's for sure one of those things where you need to tap into your network. And we did it safely. I want to say, like, we were lucky in the sense that, we were still living at home. We were just out of school. Very, very safe environment. In a riskier environment, I would have thought twice doing what we did, because it was a slow ramp up for sure. But eventually we did kind of get our base clients, and then we started branching out a little bit more risky in the sense that, like, we did some Guru, which is again like kind of like an Upwork, and that landed us some bigger clients. And the bigger clients, as soon as you land one or two of those and you have a good relationship, usually you start slow with small tasks and you build up until the point where I was working as a tech lead for a San Diego-based startup for about 3 years through the business, through a contract. Which was a great, starting point for us to build up on top of our other businesses.
Do you have, or I guess the way to ask the question is, when do you start thinking about getting clients, like further away than driving distance from you? Like what has that, especially, internationally, like, is that something that is on your mind? Or
initially, yes, hugely. Yeah. We were actually initially only focused on local markets, which was a huge mistake. I mean, we made every mistake in the book you could make as freelancers. And I mean, I think that's normal, but regardless, we made a lot of mistakes, and we were way too narrow in our search, and we got narrow clients. So we got clients that, I like to tell this story where I would put an ad on Kijiji, which is our like Craigslist about web development. And of course, you're going to get some weird calls. So I got a call. I was in a store, and someone wanted us to build a complete restaurant website with an interactive menu and a checkout system, just on the call. And I was like, okay, that's fine. That all sounds good. And they're like, okay, how much is it going to be in a ballpark? And I gave them some number. It was maybe like $3,000. We're still early on. That's way too low even now for something that complex. And they were just flabbergasted, right? They were just like, no, we're not doing that. Like, that's ridiculous. The most I would pay is $200, something like crazy, crazy difference in price. And you start realizing that as soon as you're narrowing your clients, you're also narrowing your opportunities very quickly. And you're kind of getting this like other issue where you're also letting in a bunch of noise as well from like really small clients. And so very quickly, again, we started targeting larger corporations, larger, maybe like, other dev agencies that we could partner with, that made client acquisition a lot easier and more efficient. And we were working with people that knew what they were talking about in terms of pricing. That's a really big thing and a really difficult conversation to have every time. So you want to have that kind of mutual respect both ways when you're looking for a client. And it takes time, and you're going to make mistakes going through it. But it's important to get there at some point if you plan on doing this long term, because you don't want to undervalue yourself every single time. The more undervalued you are, the less likely you're going to do good work, and the more likely it is going to get to the point where you're going to burn out.
Well, because you're doing your own business development also. So, right. So in addition to, and this is a very classic freelancer gripe, but it's the reality. Like, you are sales, you're everything. So yeah.
Yeah, you wear many hats and you suck at a lot of them.
I would say, I mean, I freelanced for 4 or 5 years myself, and I can relate to all of it. Like it's very unpredictable. You're doing your own sales work. It's, but again, once you kind of, it's a marathon, not a sprint. That's for sure. All right, cool. Well, so this is kind of the point in the show where we do plugs, and then I like to ask people, who would you like to sort of shout out, who maybe should get more attention but doesn't? They'll listen to this and
Absolutely.
get billions of followers. Yeah.
All right, so I'll do plugs first, and then I have someone in mind for that last part. So plugs for me are pretty simple. HTML All the Things. It's our web development podcast. It's a weekly podcast released on Wednesdays. We talk about all things web development, trying to target the junior level very much so. We've been doing a lot of interviews lately with some amazing people. And we always try to kind of bring it down to the junior level when you're starting out, trying to get up to speed. We also try to digest all the new information that we're getting and give you kind of a good condensed version of information so that you don't have to go out there yourself to find all the different stuff that's going on in the web development industry, because we know it's constantly expanding. That, and we already talked about it in this podcast, the Svelte course, Svelte for Beginners. It's on Udemy. I'll have the link. I'll have a discount code in that link. And that's a great course to get you started, not only learning Svelte, but again, the fundamentals of JavaScript frameworks. That's the kind of bisection that I'm going for, is making sure that I can give you that really smooth transition from your initial learnings of JavaScript to JavaScript frameworks. As well, obviously, if you're interested in Svelte, it's a fantastic framework. Check out the course. And I think really that's it. You can follow me and talk to me on Twitter. I'm constantly there.
All right. So who should we talk about? Who do you want people to go after they're done looking at your stuff?
Jacob M.G. Evans. So he works for Cloudflare. I think he was just promoted to their Cloudflare workers team, which is a cool organization inside of Cloudflare. And he has a open source raid guild Discord server, which is really, really interesting. I highly recommend you talk to him about this, because what they do is they find open source projects that they can all kind of raid together, like a World of Warcraft raid. Yeah. And so they organize like who takes over what pull request, who takes over what issue, and they just spend like a weekend killing off all the issues of like really good open source projects that are maybe like just struggling for people to work on. And they do this pretty consistently. They're trying to gamify it a little bit with the website, with like leveling up and stuff like that as you go through open source projects. But yeah, so Jacob M.G. Evans, that's his Twitter handle, and his name is obviously Jacob Evans. So you can find him on Twitter. Cool guy.
That sounds amazing. I'd love to talk to him about that, because like if you have an open source project that has a lot of bugs and you just sort of like,
you're just one person, you're like, I can't do this.
And then people just sort of rain down from above and solve all your problems for you. That sounds amazing. Yeah. Cool. Thanks so much for being on. I enjoyed it very much. Come on back.
Of course. Thanks, Brian.
See ya.